Hi, I'm Michael, and this is Carelifornia. And tonight we're talking about the spiraling possibility of a big, all-encompassing stimulus package getting negotiated, and talking about what is the main point of opposition between both parties. Because realistically, there are things that everyone can agree on, things like unemployment, stimulus checks, and legal protections. But it's the funding for states and local governments that has been the hardest pill for Republicans to swallow. So tonight we are covering the latest updates from the stimulus package negotiation, so Mitch McConnell's pessimism about another stimulus package, and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' perspective on why negotiations have stalled, and how the stimulus packages, although necessary, may run up a national deficit affecting generations of Americans to come. Now this is your 5-minute nightly dose, so let's make this quick. But before we do that, if you like this information, if you find it interesting, if you find it helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. Today, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, came out with a gloomier outlook towards the perspective of his stimulus package getting passed in the next few weeks. This would make sense since the Senate will not be coming back from the recess in full until next week, which doesn't leave much time for anything to get done, especially at a congressional pace of action. Additionally, he blames the proximity to the election and changing sentiments by the senators as key reasons for his doubt. Today, he said, "I don't know if there will be another package in the next few weeks or not." Further, he said the cooperative spirit we had back in March and April has dissipated as we move closer to the election. End quote. With the likelihood of a major stimulus package passing in the near future shrinking, Republicans are still hopeful to pass a much smaller and much less comprehensive skinny bill for $500 billion. The bill would include just things like stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, and protections for schools, universities, and institutions, but would leave out major Democratic provisions like money for state and local governments. Republican Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming said that the goal is to have a vote on the bill after senators return to Washington next week. Barrasso is the Senate Republican Conference chairman. But even if they can pass the smaller $500 billion bill, Democrats would never let it pass through the House as long as it lacks the $915 billion Democratic provision for state and local governments. But of course, the close to $1 trillion provision for state and local agencies is the major roadblock, at least from the Republican perspective, because 1, it's a lot of money, and 2, it's perceived as bailing out states who are wastefully spending their money on social programs. But Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, has said that the $915 billion for state and local governments is, quote-unquote, not based in reality. It says that the GOP would support only $150 billion for this type of funding, which, if we do the math, is only about 10% of what Democrats are actually asking for. Meadows said probably the biggest stumbling block that remains is the amount of money that would go to states and local help, end quote. But looking at the distance between the two parties' numbers, $150 billion versus $915 billion, it may end up being more of a boulder than a stumbling block. Despite all this fighting over dollars and cents, in the background is the growing bill for all the assistance measures and financial stimulus that has been implemented to keep our country running. This bill, even before the next stimulus package, is growing at a staggering rate. Today, the Congressional Budget Office released numbers about the projected federal budget deficit, which is expected to hit $3.3 trillion by the end of this year. It specifically highlights the already $2 trillion that have been spent on the pandemic as the cause for the dramatic increase. At $3.3 trillion, this would put the deficit at more than 3 times the shortfall that we had in 2019 and twice the amount we had during the Great Recession. So all in all, it's not certain what the total bill will come out to be. But one thing that is for sure is that the virus infections are still going up, and there still appears to be a long way to go and a lot more assistance that's going to be needed for the foreseeable future. Overall, the growing debt is undoubtedly worrying, especially because many of the people who will be paying it off have not even been born yet, but will bear the cost for all the spending that we're doing right now. I have no doubt that the stimulus spending is justified and needed to help keep America running and moving in the direction of recovery. But that sure is a lot of money. That being said, if Republicans can pass a $500 billion skinny bill and just add the $915 billion for state and local government, and that gets them to $1.4 trillion, which seems like a compromise that both of them can sort of agree on. Nobody will be exactly happy, but at least it'll get something passed and struggling people can get the help that they need. Understandably, this would probably mean that the much larger bills and provisions in the HEREOS Act would never ever get negotiated out. But it's getting to a point where people need the help now. We see it in the comments every single day. So if it means that there will have to be another negotiation later on down the road to get help now, then maybe it's time for Congress to settle. Now, this has been your 5-minute nightly dose, and I hope that you found it interesting or helpful or at least useful. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when our newest and most informative videos become available. Also, we here at Carelifornia, we know health insurance. So if you have any questions about your health insurance, leave those down below and we'll be happy to make a new video or a new post as soon as we can. Now, other than that, I'm Michael and this is Carelifornia, wishing you a happy, healthy day.